Welcome back to Aftermath with Scott Brown. My name is Ross. We are here to talk about all of the crossroads in life when it comes to financial planning, good decisions, bad decisions. Today's episode, we have plenty of questions. We have plenty of answers. How about our first question is going to be, what do people focus on too late in their lives when it comes to financial planning? Or is there even such a thing? How about finding out the best way to make your taxes on your retirement as small as possible? I think you should know that, and I know that this episode will get to the bottom of that. Another question, what's the most common rich person lie? And my favorite question that I've been wanting to ask Scott for a while now, what's more dangerous, optimism or fear? Sit down, get your ears ready, because we are about to talk about some of the best financial decisions that I think that you can make, and I am right there with you. Scott, thank you so much for being here. We're back at it again.
Ready to rock.
Ready to rock with more financial conversations. And just to give it some more context as well as that, like, I'm not an expert. You are an expert.
That's what we're telling people,
so
yes.
You are basically, leading me throughout all of these episodes and helping me out. And I get to go home to my wife and drop acronyms that I've never said before, and she goes, "What does that mean?" And I said, "You got to listen to Aftermath." That's my commercial.
We're here for.
We're here to spoon feed and break down acronyms.
Yes,
but we're also here today to answer some of the questions that I just mentioned here. I have to ask you, if you've seen so many clients, thousands,
yes,
that's very important for, I think, people to say or to hear, so that they understand that. I mean, we're talking about a black belt on financial conversations when it comes to all of these people with a lot of money and a little amount of money.
Well, if you break it down, and I have over 40 years, and looking at an average week of how many conversations I've had in my career, it's around 17,000 meetings.
And that is a lot. That's a lot of experience points.
Yeah.
That's enough conversations and clients that makes me go, you must have the answer to the question of, what do people focus on too late in their lives when it comes to financial planning? Or is there such a thing that's too late?
I would say the easy answer is estate planning. How am I going to leave money behind? What succession do I need for my spouse? Sometimes there's a financial spouse and there's a non-financial spouse. And the financial spouse has spent 35 years preparing the money, they're the spreadsheet person, they know what the bills are, and maybe the other spouse not so much. Maybe they it could be that the wife was a homemaker, or it could be that the husband had other interests and the wife was the person who was really the financial spouse. But one of the things I think,
I know some stay-at-home dads.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that the financial spouse oftentimes thinks they're going to live forever, so they don't provide a good vehicle for the non-financial spouse to carry on with the process. So what I am seeing a little bit of lately, though, is that the non-financial spouse will bring the financial spouse to an advisor. A lot of times they're do-it-yourselfers. They have brokerage accounts and they've been doing fine on their own. It's not like it's messed up, but they come to somebody like me to say, look, I'm probably going to outlive my husband in this example. I would like somebody to bounce ideas off of, somebody to explain this to me when he's gone. And because what happens is when a financial spouse passes unexpectedly, the non-financial spouse is kind of caught off guard and they're vulnerable. People will take advantage of them, relatives, friends, and other people will come seeking that person, and oftentimes to take advantage of them. So I think the answer to your question is, as I think this through, is it's not so much estate planning, although that's definitely in the top 5. I would say the number one thing that couples do anyway is they don't prepare the non-financial spouse for that inevitable moment when they're on their own.
Because there's plenty of things that I can say that I have focused on too late. And it's only hindsight that you get to look back and see 20/20 vision. I haven't been 75 years old, and I do not want to miss out on something. With that window.
Yeah. No. Agreed.
What when it comes to estate planning, what's the average age? Ideally, what would you want your clients to walk in and bring up estate planning?
I think at age 50 is probably when you want to start thinking about it. The more complex your situation is, the earlier you want to think about it. For most people, they've got a 401k, maybe they've got an IRA, and they've got a home. And that's typical for Americans, right? And I think in that case, you don't need to be freaked out about it because there are thresholds of wealth that make estate planning more critical. But I would say once you accumulate, a net worth of $500,000, which can be a house, it could be an IRA, it could be a 401k, it could be a couple of cars, who knows what it is. I do think you want to start to think about those things for your children, if indeed you have children, or at least for your spouse. So I would say you think about it in your 50s. I think you by God ought to have it done probably by the time you're 60.
Have you, just as a little side question just for me, probably not even appropriate for the podcast, but have you ever seen like a 25-year-old walk in and be like, I'm here to talk estate planning?
No.
All right, good.
No, I have not seen that one yet.
Because how do you not crack a smile and go like, what?
Yeah. You got your bubblegum cards. No, we've not seen the 25-year-old, but again, I think it sneaks up on people. Sometimes people come in and they're in their early 60s and they're like, oh yeah, we've been talking about that for a while. It's time to stop talking about it and get after it.
Well, it's time to stop talking about that question
All
and
right.
let's move on. Because I need to know the best way to make your taxes on your retirement account as small as possible. I'm far away from it, but I know. I only hear about these horror stories of I had $75,000 in retirement. I take out and now I owe money.
Yeah.
I've always heard these stories about like the number that's in your account might not actually be the number that you end up getting and all of that. So how do we prevent maybe some unnecessary taxes on your retirement account?
What tends to happen to people where those stories come into play, they've got a bunch of money, say in an IRA or a 401k, and they go to draw income. Of course, they have to pay income tax on that. There's no way around that, right? Mm-hmm. That's the government's going to get their piece of the action. Where we see, in fact, our practice is pretty good at capturing the idea of the Roth conversion, meaning at 74, 73, you have required distributions from qualified accounts, 401ks, IRAs, things of that nature. And where people get caught with their pants down is they've got $500,000 in an IRA that they really don't want to spend. They want to leave to the kids, but the government is forcing them to take a distribution every year and pay taxes on it.
And if I remember correctly, because this is a previous question, 401ks, if I remember correctly, tax the income going in, and then IRAs tax when it gets pulled out, or did I just black out and make something up? You
totally blacked out, but you're close. You're adjacent. You're adjacent to the correct information. So 401ks and IRAs are basically the same thing for these purposes. Money in the traditional sense is tax deductible. So you didn't pay any taxes when you put it in. When you pull it out, you have to pay taxes, which is why they require the distribution at age 73 because they want the taxes.
They want theirs.
They want theirs. So how we avoid that sometimes is we'll look at the client in their 60s and say, well, if we convert, I'll make up a number, $10,000 a year to a Roth, yes, you'll have to pay taxes on that conversion, but when you turn 73, you won't have built yourself a tax bomb, because what happens is not only do you have to pay taxes on it, but let's say your required distribution is $30,000 or $40,000, that may propel you into another tax bracket that you have to pay on everything you took out that year. So we want to try to avoid that by looking at Roth conversions before you reach that point.
Here's a question. I don't even have this on my list, but I've always wanted to know this. The whole you got to be mindful of how much you're necessarily making when it comes to tax brackets. Is there ever a time where I can make $100 more and then end up paying and it actually being a net loss?
No.
Because it feels like that's what everyone thinks, that, $60,001 new
Boom.
tax bracket, you're done for. And I never believed that.
Right. That's not correct. We have a progressive tax system, which means, yes, you could go from $60,000 at 20% just to make up a number, and then go to $60,001, and that might put you in a 24 or 25 or 26% bracket, but you're only paying the additional tax on the dollar over and above the 60,000. So as you break from one tax bracket to the next incrementally, that, for example, if it was $10,000, you would pay on that 10,000, you would pay 20%, in my example, on the 60, and then 24% say on the next 10,000, and then maybe 30% on the next 10,000. So
no one knows that.
Yeah.
No one knows that.
Well, the reason they don't know that is
that.
it's a scare tactic that firms use to make you think all these horrible things are going to happen to you.
Why? What's the point of
sell products, sell services, sell consulting, whatever it is. That's why it's vague, because it gives it a consultant of some kind, whether an accountant, lawyer, or whatever, or even a financial advisor. They can come in and say, well, I'll save the day. I'll rescue you from, because if you make $60,001, now you owe them 30 grand, right? That's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's really the tax is paid, the higher bracket is paid on whatever incremental level you've crossed.
And just to confirm, just so I have this, so I can walk around with a new fact in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
I make $60,000. I have that tax thing. Let's say I make $65,000. Oh, I'm in a new tax code, a new tax bracket. They're going to do that new tax on the extra $5,000.
That is correct.
I feel like you just Morpheus
We're good.
Yeah, dude. Like, no one knows that, and that seems like such an easy thing to get.
Yeah.
And literally 90% of Americans just think that, like, I got to make less money so I can make more.
This is a simple way. I always tell my clients, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. Sometimes clients get all caught up in, well, if I earn another 10%, I'm just going to have to pay. Oh, yeah, but you still made an extra 50 grand, and yeah, you got to pay 5 of it in taxes. But wouldn't you want the net 45,000 in that example? People get so. I've had clients say to me, well, Scott, if you make me more money, I'm just going to have to pay taxes on it. Not all of it. Yeah, you don't have to give 100% to them.
I'm dead ass serious, Scott, man. Everybody just thinks that it's the wrong. That's me learning for the first time right here in front of this microphone.
I think a lot of the things that the average American thinks is based on marketing, things they've heard, things that have been, we use scare tactics to get people to do things, whether it's, again, hiring a consultant, whether it's hiring a lawyer, whether it's, and I'm not to say that those professions aren't necessary, they're very necessary, but you have to go into it understanding the world's not going to end if you do one wrong thing, right? Mm-hmm. The system, at least currently, isn't set up to catch you, right?
And if you have the opportunity of one thing that you do and the world ends, you got to get a new job. Because that's a tough gig.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're walking a tightrope or something, I suppose one false step. Yeah. But short of that, I think that all of this, I think this is where people get hung up, is they think these things are so drastic and so, it's either good or bad, or if I do this, the world's going to end. So then they do nothing. Then they just shut down. I'm not talking about this anymore. It's too intimidating. If I make a wrong move, I'm going to be embarrassed. My family's going to hate me. No, none of that is true. It's just, take a second, take a deep breath. The world isn't going to end if you go into the next tax bracket.
Well, I think you may have accidentally answered this next question, but you're talking about things that are not true. I want to know, what's the most common rich person lie? Because there's like this weird thing. Listen, people can judge my hoodie that I'm wearing right now. Mm-hmm. I ain't got no $5,000 pinky ring. So in a weird way, like, I know a lot of people around me and my friends, and they call it for what it is, the people that make the amount of money that my friends and I do. We look at, sometimes we can look at a very wealthy person, and then they go like, why aren't they paying taxes and stuff? But I also think, like, hey, don't step on anybody's bag, figure it out yourself. But I want to know, what's the one thing that they aren't necessarily telling the truth about that they tell everybody? What's the most common rich person lie?
I think on the surface, the first common rich person lie is, I don't need the money, or I'd be fine without the money. Oof. Well, if you'd be fine without the money, you wouldn't have the money, right? I mean, the reality is, if you've worked hard, you've done a lot of right things, made a lot of good decisions, and worked your way up to the point where you're quote unquote wealthy, you're not really that interested in going back, right? I'm not saying you couldn't live on less. I'm not saying you wouldn't survive. But I think one of the big lies is, I don't really care that much about them. No, you do. That's why you have it, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that. I also think that there is an element. We got this on the radio the other day. There's a guy who keeps calling me a boomer, which I don't love, since I'm only a boomer by a couple of weeks. But
brother, you're a boomer by a couple hours. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're like this. You look like a jazz piano player to me. That's the first thing that jumps out.
Even better. And he keeps harping on the pulling up the ladder behind you while Rome is burning. And I get the mentality is that there are wealthy people who use the system, did certain things, who now would like to make it harder for other people, right, to do the very same thing. We see that with monopolies in companies, Microsoft, Amazon, whatever it is, have all been sued, brought before the Justice Department. Sometimes they get in trouble, sometimes they don't. One of the things some wealthy, not all wealthy people, but many wealthy people do is they can also be judgmental. I've had people say, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but you don't know that particular person's situation. I openly admit my success, at least 50% of it's just stupid luck. I met the right person at the right time. Somebody said something to me. I was presented with an opportunity. Now I took the opportunity. Sometimes people are presented with opportunities and they don't take them. But again, there's a lot of luck involved in accumulating wealth.
It's my favorite quote. We're both golfers, and I think it's Arnold Palmer, could be somebody else. I've seen Arnold Palmer given the quote is that it's funny. The harder I work, the luckier I get.
Again, there's an element of that. I can think back to a moment in my life where I was filling milk at Publix. I was putting the milk in the refrigerator at whatever, 18, 19 years of age.
Alternate the arms, man. Gallons are heavy.
That's right. You got to check the dates, make sure the old ones are in the front and the new ones are in the back.
And it's a bad look when one arm is jacked.
That's right. Like a tennis player with that one milk arm. But I remember meeting a guy who was stocking shelves along with me, and he said, hey, my brother's in the investment business. I'm going to go do an internship in Orlando. You have any interest? And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. Had I not had that, where would my life be? I have no idea. Had that guy not put that milk in that refrigerator with me at that moment and said that thing, would my life look entirely different?
My version of that, I think I absolutely have one of those. I wouldn't be here in front of this microphone if I didn't get a no at an audition and completely agreed. I didn't get the gig and I was like, you're right. I need to get on a stage. So I went out and started doing stand-up comedy. And then I got decent. So then I proactively signed up looking for other opportunities. Won a comedy competition. That got me on a weekly radio segment. That weekly radio segment was also around a guy who was getting his own radio show. And he enjoyed what I was throwing down. And next thing I know, I'm on a radio show. Next thing I know, I'm meeting the clients of that radio show. And then I meet Scott. I know I look at my life as a huge benefit of luck, but I don't gloss over the hard thing that I did was wake up that morning, be proactive for an opportunity to work.
Well, I think you can be aware of both, right? You can be aware of the fact that, there's some luck involved, right? Had Bill Gates not been born in the Pacific Northwest where there was a computer at his disposal, which was very rare at that time, maybe he wouldn't be Bill Gates today. He would be successful. There's no two ways about it. But, same for me is had I not had that conversation, would I have seen other opportunities? Would I have taken another path to the same place? Possibly. But you can be aware as a wealthy person or a person of means to say, I was lucky, but I also saw the opportunity and busted my ass to grab it.
I got to be careful on how I ask this. Is how much does... I think people don't want to give too much credit to luck. Because it's out of our control.
Sure.
And it's also, if you do say that's lucky, you're also opening up what you believe in, I think, philosophically as well, a little bit of just, but how much does luck play a role in financial planning? Or is your job to make luck as small of a part of it?
I would say luck plays a role. I'm a probability guy. If somebody comes in and says, I want to do this thing, I have this much money, I save this much money, and I want to retire at this age, I say to myself, what are the probabilities of success, right? Is there a 20% chance or an 80% chance? There's never going to be a 100% chance, right? Markets could fall apart. We could wake up tomorrow and the stock market drops, 20,000 points. That could happen. Probably won't, but it could. So what I look for in a conversation, whether it's about business, whether it's about wealth accumulation, whether it's about health, is if I run 2 miles a day and I lift weights 3 times a week, there's a high probability I'll be in pretty good shape. Conversely, I could take a diet pill and maybe, try some calisthenics for 5 minutes in the morning. There's a very low probability of that happening, right? I'm always trying to increase the probability. If a client says, I have $1 million and I need $90,000 a year in income, I can do the math in my head and say, well, that's 9%. That is a low probability of sustenance. There's a low probability you're going to pull that off and not run out of money. Whereas if they say I need $30,000 a year and that's 3%, I'm like, now your probability is 90% that you won't outlive that money, right? I'm all about what are the probabilities and making them better, knowing that they will never be 100%.
So you're like a human Vegas.
I am.
But
I'm the
for
house.
the people.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Vegas is trying to
the
take your
edge goes
money.
the other way. Yes.
Yeah. Vegas is trying to take your money. You're trying to keep people's money.
Yes.
You're trying to, no, this is, you keep it.
And again, it's like somebody buying crypto.
I like that. You're the positive Las Vegas.
I am the positive Vegas. It's like crypto. When people buy crypto, they don't really. There's a low probability from the get-go because there's nothing driving the price other than supply and demand. So if the price goes up, the demand was high, but there's no reason for the demand other than there is some.
Yeah,
right?
belief of its future.
Yeah, somebody's like, all right, I don't really know what this does or how it works, but I'm going to buy some. And if enough people say that, the price will go up. And then one day all those people wake up and go, what is this thing? And then they all start to sell it. You're just the probability is low because there's no rationale for the price movement. Whereas if I buy I'll just use Microsoft, and this is not a pitch to buy Microsoft, but if you use Microsoft and you say, well, I know they've got a new product coming out. I know they just bought 30% of AI, OpenAI. I know that Windows is the dominant, force in the business world, and yada, 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 yada. The probability of Microsoft going out of business, not paying my dividend, or not growing is not very high. It's not zero, but the probability of success there as a company is pretty high. You're always trying to put yourself in the best position to have the highest probability, knowing that there's going to be a little luck involved. If you bought Tesla 4 or 5 years ago and you said, I think that's going to be a neat thing. I think, Elon Musk has got this figured out. And then the stock went up 2,000%. Yeah, you did something, but there was a little bit of luck involved.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But it doesn't hurt to also recognize, because if you don't look at it as a little bit lucky, then you might kind of get to your head and then you start going, I'm really good at this.
Yes, you confuse brilliance for a bull market, right?
And that is a perfect segue for our last question of today's episode. What is more dangerous, optimism or fear, when it comes to financial planning? Because what we were just talking about is a great example. You made $7,000 bajillion off of Tesla stock, but you refuse to recognize the aspect, the percentage of luck.
Right.
So now you're optimistic that you are so good at this, and now you just bought something, and then you bought another thing, and now you're rubbing your hands going, I am an expert.
Yes.
That can bite you.
That's delusional is what that is. Yeah. Yeah. Again, recognize you got lucky. Saving money over a long period of time and having $1 million is not luck. It's determination. It's process. It's high probability. Buying a stock for $1 and having it go to 100 is luck. Right. So to answer your question, we were talking about Admiral Stockton, who was a Vietnam prisoner of war, and he talked about the people who were the optimists all died, or mostly died. And somebody would say, well, why would the optimists be the ones that died? Because every couple of months they thought, this is it, we're going to get out. Easter, we're going to get out by Easter. We're going to get out by the 4th of July. We're going to get out by whatever, Labor Day. well, we're definitely going to be out by Christmas. And each time they were disappointed, it broke their hearts, and eventually they just capitulated to their captors. Whereas he was a stoic. He's like, it'll happen when it happens, right? I'm going to stay alive. I'm going to keep my probabilities high. I'm not going to allow myself to be too high or too low. Moderation in this situation. If you're too optimistic and you're like sometimes I'll talk to somebody and they're 40 and they don't have substantial savings, and I'll say, well, what are you going to do? Oh, I'll figure it out. I'm not worried about it. I'm sure something will happen. And I'm like, are you?
Right.
Sure.
Okay. Here comes scratch-offs.
Yeah, so that's overly optimistic, I think. The other side of it is somebody who's not going to save because the world's going to end. And, they're the pessimists. They're the people who say, well, what's the point? Social Security is not going to be there. I can tell you for 40 years I've been told Social Security is not going to be there. Guess what? Still there.
Still there.
Probably will still be there. Yes, it's got some issues, but hopefully we'll get them resolved. But the pessimist, the cynic, I always say cynicism is a tool of procrastination. Because if something's stupid or you don't like it or it seems wrong, you don't have to do it. I'll give you an example. Talking to a guy about his 401k. 401k is a ripoff. I don't like it. Fees are too high. Returns suck. I don't want to give the company my money. What he's just given himself is a reason not to do what he needs to do.
And it is as close to a need as possible. I don't know. For me, I'm speaking somewhat op-ed here.
Yeah.
401ks, the research that I've done about them, and a lot of people don't sign up for them because they just I hate this company.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then love yourself. Take more of their money.
That's the irony.
Isn't that the irony? I think we've talked about it before, but I once heard a friend tell me that he couldn't afford a 401k, and I almost had to slap the irony out of his mouth. Like it was so odd. So, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but you've had all of these conversations, you've had all of these clients, all this financial planning. Overall, both have their problems being too optimistic and being too fearful, but is there one that people tend to lean towards? Is there a worse out of the two?
Probably pessimism, because people get bitter at some point. I think that, if you're kind of a grumpy, bitter 25-year-old, by the time you're 35, you probably are who you are. And I think the pessimists, they just get more and more pessimistic because now they have a reason to be pessimistic, right? When you're 25 and you're like, that's crap. I'm not doing that 401k or that deferred comp or simply saving in my savings. I'm living for today, man. Who knows what's going to happen? Look at what's going on with the government, which has been said for my entire career.
Man, it's like you saw me when I was 25 telling people I was a leaf in the wind. Mm-hmm. I'm a little too personal, just what you just said there.
Yeah, let's let that settle in.
Yeah.
So the pessimism is almost self-fulfilling, right? You're pessimistic at 25, you're pessimistic at 35, you're still not doing anything at 45. You're behind the 8 ball at 55. You're in bad shape. Now you got good reason to be pessimistic, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow.
The optimists oftentimes wake up, to the reality. They may say, well, I'll get it done. And then 35, 42, 47, I haven't gotten it done. Maybe I should, I think a lot of times those people come around. When you're a pessimist by nature and you become bitter, and I see this all the time. I see this in 401k meetings. I see the guy, I've talked about the guy, it's always the cross arm guy. He's staring at me with anger and he's just staring daggers through me because I'm talking about a 401k that he has no money in, and he's 54 years old and he knows he's in trouble and he's got to be mad at somebody, so it might as well be me. Yeah.
And then, well, we got to end this episode with some positivity.
Yeah, let's do it.
I wanted to throw this out here is of recent, you had your State of the Union.
Yes.
We collabed. We were on the same stage for one night. You put me at a table with people who I don't think I was ready for, and they weren't ready for me.
Right.
But guess what? We ended up being great friends. I became friends with, his name is
Eugenio.
Yeah. It was so awesome awesome
Yeah.
being at that table. And I wanted to end at least on one of these conversations is a massive thank you.
Yeah. Back at you.
I can't thank you enough for sitting down in front of these minds that are absolutely worth picking. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, we had our State of the Union this year. I think we had 120 guests at it. We brought in Raymond James lead economist Eugenia, who you're speaking of. We brought in Todd Ferguson, who's the head of cybersecurity at Raymond James. And of course, we do what we do, and you did a magnificent job of warming everybody up.
Yeah, and then I did stand-up comedy.
You did.
In front of chief economists.
Economist
I.
What other firm besides Edgewater Family Wealth, shameless plug, does a State of the Union that opens with a stand-up comic? The caliber of Ross Padgett.
It was awesome, and that's how you end an episode with some positivity. So, and I also want to say thank you to all of our listeners. Some positive reinforcement from me to you. So now that you have the answers to questions like, what do people focus on too late? What is the best way to make the taxes on your retirement account as small as possible? What's the most common rich person lie? And also my favorite question probably of this entire series is, what's more dangerous, optimism or fear? I think we can unequivocally say fear, which is why we're going to be optimistic. Scott, thank you so much.
You got it.
That's been some Aftermath. See you next week.